It was a dry, dusty evening in the small frontier town of Red Creek, where the sun dipped low, painting the land in shades of gold and rust. The wind whispered across the empty street as the last few townsfolk locked up their stores. Inside the small general shop near the edge of town, Emma Carson stood behind the counter, nervously straightening the same row of canned peaches she'd fixed 3 times already. Her brother, Frank, was in the back counting the day's money, or more accurately, making sure Emma didn't touch any of it. She'd been working since dawn, her hands raw from lifting crates, but Frank always found a way to belittle her efforts. "You think folks come here to see your face, don't you?" he barked, slamming the cash drawer shut. "You're just lucky I let you stay under this roof." Emma bit her tongue, the words she wanted to say burning behind her lips. But before she could respond, the door creaked open and a tall figure stepped in. Dust-covered boots, a brown leather vest, and a calmness that seemed to quiet the air around him. It was Luke Maddox, the quiet cowboy who'd recently bought a ranch just outside town. He was known for minding his own business. But every woman in Red Creek noticed how he carried himself. Steady, strong, like a man who'd seen storms and survived them all. Luke tipped his hat. "Evenin', Miss Carson, Frank." His voice was calm, deep, the kind that could settle wild horses. Emma offered a faint smile, but Frank just grunted. "Store's closing soon," he said sharply. Luke nodded, setting a small list on the counter. "Just need a few supplies." As Emma reached for the items, her brother's glare followed her every move. She accidentally dropped a tin can, and it rolled across the floor. Frank's temper flared instantly. "Can't you do one thing right, woman?" he snapped, grabbing her wrist harshly. Emma winced, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. Luke's head lifted at once, his calm expression hardening like steel. "That's enough," he said, his tone low but sharp as a whip. Frank sneered, tightening his grip. "This is family business, cowboy. Stay out of it." But before Frank could finish his threat, Luke's hand shot out like lightning. He caught Frank's raised arm midair, his grip firm, unyielding. "No more," he said, his eyes locking on Frank's. The room went dead silent, only the soft creak of the floorboards beneath them breaking the tension. Frank tried to yank his arm free, but Luke didn't move. "You raise your hand against her again, and you'll answer to me," the cowboy said, voice steady but filled with quiet rage. Emma's breath caught. No one had ever stood up to her brother before. Frank's bluster faltered as he looked into Luke's eyes, the eyes of a man who meant every word. Finally, Luke released him, and Frank stumbled back, muttering curses under his breath. He stormed toward the door, slamming it behind him, leaving the shop in uneasy stillness. Emma stood frozen, her wrist still red from her brother's grip. Luke turned to her, his expression softening. "You all right, Miss Carson?" She nodded shakily, her voice barely a whisper. I'll be fine." "You shouldn't have done that. Mr. Maddox. Frank. He's got a temper." Luke's gaze held hers. A man's temper's no excuse for cruelty. Outside, the sun had dipped completely, and the first stars began to flicker in the purple sky. Luke helped her close the store, moving quietly, respectfully. "You shouldn't have to take that from him," he said as they stepped onto the porch. "You deserve better than being someone's punching post." Emma stared down at her hands, feeling the truth of his words cut deep. "He's all the family I've got," she murmured. "And sometimes, I think maybe he's right. Maybe I'm just a burden." Luke stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't ever believe that. You're stronger than you think. I've seen strength before, real strength. And you've got it." For the first time in years, Emma felt seen, not as her brother's burden or the town's shopgirl, but as a woman worth standing up for. The days that followed changed everything. Frank avoided the store, embarrassed that someone had put him in his place. Word spread around Red Creek about the cowboy who'd stopped him, and folks looked at Emma differently, with a kind of quiet respect. Luke kept coming by, helping her with heavy crates, fixing the old porch steps, never asking for anything in return. When she protested, he just smiled. "Ain't helping, ma'am. Just doing what's right." Slowly, laughter returned to her voice, the color to her cheeks, and one evening as they watched the sun sink beyond the hills, she turned to him and said softly, "You changed my life." "Luke," he smiled faintly beneath the brim of his hat, "you just needed someone to remind you what you're worth." As the wind carried the scent of sage and dust, Emma knew something deep in her heart. The West was full of rough men and hard times, but sometimes just one act of kindness could turn a life around. Luke didn't just stop her brother's hand that day. He stopped the years of fear and silence that came with it. He gave her courage, and in return, she gave him something he hadn't expected: a reason to stay. And to everyone listening to this story, and remember, sometimes standing up for what's right doesn't just change someone else's life, it changes your own. If you believe in stories of courage, hope, and redemption like this one, make sure you subscribe to our channel, because more powerful Western tales are coming your way. Sound stories that'll touch your heart and remind you that heroes still exist, even in the dust and silence of the Old West.